Good morning. Welcome to our webinar this morning on business communication skills. I will be your facilitator for the next 2 hours. My name is Mariette Muller. The introduction to business communication skills is, why is this an important topic? Why is it important for us to be aware of or growing a skill or developing a skill on business communication? Now, this is a simple comic strip, but it clearly indicates, as I think a lot of times when we talk to each other in the workplace, how we talk to each other, that sometimes we hear what somebody is saying, but we don't really listen to what they're saying. So in this case where Dilbert's manager says that the report that he's given is not what she wanted, and he says, I know, but your communication skills are so poor that I've kind of given up on what you want from me, and I just put random numbers on a spreadsheet. And she states, but why didn't you just ask me? And he says, well, clearly you don't listen either. And I think that that's a lot of times what happens is that we talk to each other, but sometimes we talk at each other. Sometimes as much as we intend to hear each other, we don't. As much as we intend to listen, we don't. And as part of any other skill, a technical skill or a soft skill, it doesn't matter. Communication in the business and effective communication is a skill that we need to acquire and we need to develop over time. Now, what is the outline that we're going to look at today? We're going to look at what is seen as communication, understanding what are the barriers that are set up that hinder us from communicating effectively. We're going to look at paraverbal and non-verbal skills. Then speaking like a star, listening skills. So as much as we want to communicate to somebody, we need to listen when that person communicates to us. Then we need to ask good questions. And how do we do that? When somebody is communicating to us, we need to make sure we ask the right type of questions to get the right type of input and to make sure what is required from us or the feedback that we are given is the right, or that we give is the right kind of output. Then we need to understand what is the difference between asking a question versus an appreciative inquiry. And then looking at mastering the art of conversation with some guidelines on things that we can do to now develop the skill of communication. So what is communication? Communication has 4 elements that form part of communication. And the first thing is that communicating is defined as the interchange of thoughts, opinions, or information by either speech, writing, or signs. That is how the dictionary defines communication. It can also be defined as meaning the sending of messages or orders, for example, via the telephone, the telegraph, radio, television, social media, any type of electronic platform. Or it can be seen where, if it's defined within biology, it's an activity by one organism that changes or has the potential to change the behavior of other organisms. And even though we refer to a biological definition, that is what communication does, is we have something to say, another person needs to hear it, and what we are communicating affects how they are going to act. And depending on how we communicate, it could have a positive or a negative impact, or sometimes it will have zero impact on the other person. Things that we need to look at that affect our ability to effectively communicate with other people is things such as our own level of stress. What is our relationship with the person or persons that we are trying to communicate to? What is our own level of satisfaction with our own life? Perhaps my productivity currently being positive or negative will affect the way that I'm going to communicate with another person. My ability that is affected for meeting my own goals and dreams will affect how I communicate with another person. And then my own ability to solve problems will affect how I am going to communicate to another person or persons. How do we communicate? Now, there's a variety of ways that we communicate, and if we look at the verbal side, there's two sides to communicating verbally, and the first one is the spoken word, and the spoken word has got two components, and the two components are verbal communication and paraverbal communication. Verbal communication that is simply what I'm saying. That's my sentence. Paraverbal is how I am saying it to another person. And this will look at the tone with which I'm talking, the speed with which I'm talking, the pitch that my voice is set at, and the volume, that how loud am I talking to the other person. Then in terms of the unspoken, non-verbal communication is the gestures and the body language that accompany your words. So non-verbal also will be your written communication, but includes your gestures and your body language. So spoken is what I'm saying, paraverbal is how I'm saying it, with what tone, but non-verbal is also what is my body language. So am I folding my arms across my chest? Am I tapping my feet while somebody is talking to me? Have I got an irritated attitude? So how am I communicating to another person? With what body language am I communicating to them as well? And then written communication is whether it is via fax, email, or written word. What is the most common way that we as individuals communicate with each other? It is via email, social media, or WhatsApp, that type of interaction if we look at in the modern world. In terms of the modern business place, the biggest part of communication is email communication. And this is where our communication skills, if we do not develop them, typically falls flat, because in an email is a very dangerous thing for communication, because how you structure your communication sets the tone, and the tone cannot always be heard. So there are a variety of things that we need to look at when we communicate via email. And then we as, let's say, accountants in our profession, we are not always the most sociable people, and I think that is also a generalization of the type of people that we are. But the majority of us are not developed to have communication skills, and we are taken from a position and we are thrust into another position where we have to deal with people, we have to deal with employees, we have to deal with our clients, we have to deal with our managers, we have to deal with our peers, and once we move up the corporate ladder with our subordinates. And nowhere are we ever taught, but how do I communicate in business with another person? So we need to think of a variety of ways that we're communicating, whether it's verbal, paraverbal, non-verbal, or in the written word. Some other factors that we need to take into consideration when we look at communication is the method, the mass, and the audience. The method is the way that the communicator would share his or her message, and that has an effect on the message itself, because that will either be person to person, could be via telephone, it could be on the radio, it could be on Facebook, it could be on email. So there's a variety of methods in which one person communicates with another person. Then if we look at mass, this is the number of people that is receiving the message. If you think about an email, and you send an email to one person, but you CC 20 people, that has an effect on how the person receiving the message will interpret what you are communicating. It has to have an effect. Then if we look at the audience, is the people that we are sending our message to. They also affect the message, because what they understand when they read the message or hear the message, and how they interpret it and understand it, has an effect on your effective delivery of the communication, and whether it is for communicating knowledge to them or requiring input from them or giving them a task to do or giving them feedback on the task, all of that will be affected by the receiver of communication as well. And that was why in part of in business communication, it is as much about what I am communicating to you, but it is also about I as the receiver. What do I hear, and what are the types of things that I need to do as the receiver to make sure that I hear and understand what did the deliverer of the message mean when they communicated with me.